My name is Claire Miller, 34, an art conservator. In my profession, I've learned that every detail, every shadow, and every nuance holds significance. The essence of preservation isn't just about restoring objects, but about reviving their stories. However, I was about to discover that some stories are more painful than I could have ever imagined. The day of my wedding rehearsal was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, but it became the start of a relentless nightmare. I was in a small room with windows opening to a heavy gray sky, surrounded by calming yet restless preparations. The wedding dress I had dreamed of for so long hung there, like a work of art awaiting critique. It was made of perfectly restored linen, the same fiber my grandmother wore on her own wedding day. Every stitch had been carefully planned, every detail meticulously considered. It was more than a dress, it was a legacy, a link between past and future. But in that moment, something simply felt wrong. As I adjusted the veil, the sound of laughter echoed from the other side of the door. Lourdes, my future mother-in-law, always so proper in her demeanor, stood in the doorway, along with Beatrice, my fiancée. The tension in the air was palpable, as if even the walls knew of the silent feud between us. I masked my apprehension and turned to the mirror, seeking solace in the reflection staring back. Then, the unthinkable happened. A swift movement, a glass of red wine, and the world around me stopped as the crimson liquid flowed toward my dress. Horror washed over me like a sharp, inevitable chill. Everyone in the room seemed to watch in slow motion, but Lourdes's triumphant gaze injected a venom into my veins I didn't know I possessed. A nervous laugh echoed, a barely concealed expression of satisfaction. My lips tightened into a rigid line. In this instant, I wasn't just losing a dress. The die was cast, and with it, a legacy, a story I had hoped to perpetuate. As the wine began to stain the fabric, I couldn't contain the pain and humiliation that consumed me. It was a symbol of destruction, a burden Lourdes seemed to carry with pleasure. There she was, right in front of me, enjoying the sight of my despair, while everyone around me scrambled to clean up the mess. A desire for revenge bloomed within me. The feeling was familiar, like a primal instinct awakening. I had always believed that art history is written in subtle strokes of choice and consequence, but here, in the defilement of my own legacy, a line had been crossed. She forgot my family's legacy was within my grasp, I thought. The sight of that dark stain spreading across the pristine linen was only the beginning. I maintained control, even as rage simmered inside me. The bubbling emotions were like a shaken wine, effervescent in the bottle, about to explode. I looked again at my dress, the linen now adorned with stains that shouldn't be there. The need to restore it, not just physically, but as a personal affirmation, formed a plan in my mind. Restoration isn't just a physical act. It's a mental process. I studied each stain, envisioning how I could reclaim my lost honor. The wine, however destructive, could be treated. The first step was analyzing the composition. It was red wine, from a brand I recognized from past dinners, and that brought me a sliver of comfort. If I understood what was at stake, I would know how to overcome it. My first course of action would be to find the family heirloom that had been tucked away and forgotten. It was, in fact, an antique piece of clothing that symbolized strength and resilience. Entire histories were embedded in every stitch, a symbol of the determination and struggle of the women in my family. The problem was, nobody believed I could access it. At that moment, a revelation struck me. The quest for the heirloom wasn't just about restoring a dress, but about unleashing a legacy, an opportunity to show Lourdes that she could laugh, but I had the strength of my ancestors on my side. I focused on what I needed to do. As an art conservator, I wouldn't allow myself to lose control. My plans were only beginning to take shape, and the room, though filled with laughter, was becoming the stage for a carefully calculated revenge. Lourdes's irritating smile began to dissolve into silence, and with it, a new chapter of my story was about to be written. I was ready to rise above the betrayal and restore not only a garment, but my dignity, and, more importantly, my legacy. In the days following the rehearsal incident, I found myself immersed in emotional turmoil, every thought revolving around the vengeful desire that simmered within me, like wine left to ferment too long. It brewed against Lord's dialectical oppression, this woman who was not only my future mother-in-law, but a matriarch who found peace in undercutting my achievements and questioning my validity. And as my fiancée, Beatrice, tried to smooth the tension between us, I realized the true essence of what was at stake. Family gatherings, once joyous celebrations filled with laughter, had become battlefields scarred with emotional wounds. I remember moments when lords would deliver veiled criticisms, wrapped in a sharp, polite smile. "Claire, you really should consider working in something that utilizes your degree productively," she'd suggest, her voice sweet as poison. That phrase echoed in my mind every time we were together. And yet, I wanted to please her. I wanted to be accepted, even if it meant losing myself. Recalling more dinners, certain episodes leaped out at me. Once, Lourdes had made a point of highlighting my choice of decorations for her event, turning it into a pointed critique. "After all, what do you know about style? Have you ever seen what we have at home?" I remembered her eyes searching for any flaw, any opportunity to put me down. Frustration grew within me like a storm about to break. But in those moments, I remained controlled, even when the heat of annoyance became unbearable. But what intensified within me truly revealed itself after the spilled wine incident. What began as a day of joy and celebration transformed into a landmark of betrayal. My dignity irrevocably stained. It was then that I realized Lourdes hadn't just erred. She had become the catalyst for my journey. As an art conservator, I not only cared for the past, but also sought to rescue and protect the history that shaped who I was, and more importantly, who I could be. And now, history was taking a dark turn. A bright light ignited in my heart. The family heirloom I'd heard mentioned in hushed whispers. My great-grandmother's wedding dress was more than just a garment. It was a symbolic legacy, an emblem of the struggles and triumphs of all the women who came before me. I remembered my mother's conversations about the dress, speaking of it fondly, as if talking about an old friend. "The strength of the women in our family resides in this fabric," she would say. That dress pulsed in my blood, resurrecting a phoenix within me. From that moment of self-affirmation, I began to formulate a plan. I started navigating the fabric of my family's history, talking to relatives who could tell me more about the heirloom. I recalled every story I heard, the many tales of the dress being worn at weddings, symbols of love, threads of bravery, and sometimes tears. The dress carried a weight that was tangible and real, and I knew I couldn't let it be ruined by a casual glass of spilled wine. I returned to my mother's house, a sense of determination pulsing within me. The hallways opened up, revealing childhood memories. Each corner whispered stories of resilience. As I walked, my mind focused on finding the old wooden box where the dress was kept. I knew that there lay the solution to my dilemma. Reaching the attic floor, the smell of old wood mixed with dust embraced me. The box was covered in a thin layer of dust and cobwebs, signs that no one had touched it for years. As if about to unearth a lost treasure, I slowly lifted the lid, and there it was, the dress. As I carefully removed it, reverencing its fragility, I wondered how I could restore it. Its ornate lace and delicate embroidery cried out for protection and renewal, and once again, the memory of ancestral strength made itself heard. As I examined each stitch and detail, I realized the dress's condition mirrored my own struggle. At the height of its splendor, it had been the very definition of strength and fragility, just as I felt at that moment. A combination of hope and disillusionment. Papers with records of my lineage were tucked between the folds, tracing a line of continuity and undeniable connection. It needed to be restored not just for a wedding, but to reaffirm my identity and the legacy I now felt so strongly. With the help of Peter and other friends in the art world, I began to plan the restoration. Peter agreed to help me understand the best methods to revive the dress's essence, suggesting remarkable preservation techniques. Sometimes, we just need a small change to rediscover the beauty that was always there. You can use this journey to show everyone that history can't be erased, he said, inspiring me to invest not only in the fabric, but in the message it carried. Weeks passed. The routine that once seemed unbearable was now filled with a singular purpose. Every vial of dye, every thread I joined to the dress, contributed to more than just its restoration. It was a personal act of defiance. Somehow, that heirloom was becoming an extension of myself. The idea of taking it to Beatrice's wedding was now a symbol of rebirth. I was on a journey to restore not only the heirloom, but my standing as a strong and dignified woman in the Almeida family. More than that, I was about to transform a day that should have been a celebration of union into a meta-narrative of empowerment. And so, with each passing day, it became clearer that I was no longer an invisible presence in the Almeida family. I was Claire Miller, an art conservator, a woman who would honor the voices of her ancestors. With this, the path that stretched before me brightened with the certainty that lords would forget that I had a legacy to reclaim. With this, the true journey of empowerment began. During my restoration journey, feelings of empowerment and determination began to blend with a growing desire for justice. The family heirloom I was working to revive became a symbol of the strength I was discovering not only within myself, but in the ancestral struggle of all the women in my lineage. What had begun as a quest to repair damage was transforming into a mission. I needed to understand more about the heirloom and what it meant to my relationship dynamic with Beatrice and Lords. Driven by this understanding, I decided it would be prudent to conduct a more thorough investigation into the dress and the history it carried. I threw myself into library after library, poring over every book that might contain it, searching for details and stories that had been forgotten. Hours flew by as I reviewed old documents and maps charting my family's genealogy. With each discovery, a new piece of the puzzle emerged. One afternoon, while reviewing an old diary belonging to my great-grandmother, I found annotations about the dress that shocked me. "In times of adversity," she had written, "it is our clothes that strengthen and unite us. A dress is not just clothing, it's a shield." These words resonated with me like a mantra, and I realized that the heirloom had become more than a mere garment. It was a manifestation of the resilience of a woman who lived through hard times. Inspired, my mind began to formulate a plan and a strategy for figuring out how I could access the heirloom, not just practically but emotionally. I knew I needed allies to make this possible, people who could access these sacred and secure objects. So, I contacted my network of friends and colleagues in the art and preservation field, and spoke with Peter about my findings and the importance of this piece. "There's been talk about the old heirloom," I shared with him. "No one believes I'm capable of retrieving it. That needs to change." With a look of determination, he offered to help me investigate its location, as well as any relevant information about its preservation and history. We began exploring together the connections it might have in the city. Peter had old contacts involved in auctions and antique sales, and he didn't hesitate to use his influence to gain access. With his help, I searched lists of items that had been in previous transactions and conducted a search through the histories of people who used to handle the heirloom. I needed to find out what happened to it, and more importantly, how I could regain possession of this history. Driven by curiosity and necessity, I followed every lead toward potential conversations, roadblocks, and also some promises of hope. Meanwhile, the dress continued to be carefully restored in my home. Just as the seams were meticulously joined, my determination also grew. With each stitch I made, I felt I was weaving not only the dress, but also the emotional support I needed to strengthen myself against Lords. One night, while working on the dress, I finally received news. Peter had gotten a name. An elderly lady who had lived in our town knew about the heirloom. Her name is Mrs. Edith, a specialist in historical clothing, who could help me understand what had really happened to the heirloom. That is, where it might be found. My anticipation grew as I prepared for that meeting. Chasing the story became as important to me as bringing the heirloom back into my family's life. The day of the meeting arrived, and upon entering Mrs. Edith's house, I could feel the atmosphere charged with history. The old lady was surrounded by fabrics, threads, and vestiges of hundreds of stories sewn into her room. She lit up when talking about fashion and clothing. Her eyes gleamed when she mentioned the importance of each garment in women's lives. "Clothes tell us where we came from and where we intend to go," she said, while examining the prototypes. And then I asked about the heirloom, about the dress I so longed to reclaim. "Ah, your great-grandmother's dress. It has a long and rich history," she began. My breath caught as her words danced around me. Each phrase revealed new dimensions of the narrative I was obligated to know. It passed through several hands over the years, and in difficult times it was truly a symbol for a whole generation. Not just a garment, but a talisman for women who felt lost when things got tough. Mrs. Edith then told me that the dress was kept in a private collection by someone who had bought it at an auction, unaware of its true historical and emotional value. I couldn't believe it. They had stifled the story of such an important part of my life. And suddenly, now there was a way to retrieve it. And this recovery wouldn't just be physical. It was a chance to restore the dignity my great-grandmother had meant for me. Determination surged back into my heart even stronger. "I will do everything to reclaim this piece," I told her, as her eyes shone with understanding. I knew it wouldn't be easy. That possession of the heirloom wouldn't come without resistance. But I was ready for a fight. The dress was calling to me, and this struggle echoed the voices of all the women in my lineage who had suffered and recovered, just like me. As my meeting ended, a profound sense of purpose washed over me. This wasn't just a quest for a wedding dress. It was a search for identity, to restore not only the relic, but the very memory they tried to erase. As I walked away from Mrs. Edith's house, I realized I was about to take another big step. The legacy lords had tried to destroy would, in fact, be my path to true reclamation and empowerment. I was starting to stand my ground, and the journey of recovery was only just beginning. After the illuminating encounter with Mrs. Edith, an intense heat consumed me. My great-grandmother's dress was somewhere far away, beyond my reach and my history. And now more than ever I was determined to rescue this piece of my past. A new flame of determination ignited within me, and Mrs. Edith's words echoed in my mind, fueling a fervor I had never felt before. This dress wasn't just an artifact. It was a symbol of struggle and awareness, and I wasn't about to let its story be lost. With a racing heart and a to-do list forming, I began to devise a methodical plan. I needed to find out where the dress was being kept. To do this, I entered a new phase of investigation, delving into archives, auction records, and any document that could lead me to the new owner. The feeling of urgency and excitement accompanied me every step of the way. The first step was to contact Albert again. "What can you tell me about the auction where the dress was sold?" I asked, unable to hide my anxiety. He remembered details that hadn't been discussed before. "If you can get a list of the auctioned items, it might be possible to track down some of the people who participated in the event." Soon, I was in an archive room, surrounded by papers and reports from past auctions. Over the following days, I sifted through boxes and more boxes, facing an avalanche of papers that tested my patience. Names of collectors, photos of each piece, and bid lists all piled up in front of me. However, as I pored over these documents, the connection I had established with the dress strengthened me. It was more than just a garment. It represented the essence of the women who came before me. Finally, one record caught my attention. The name of a collector who had acquired the dress for a very high price. Her name was Helena Ribeiro, a woman known for her refined taste in antiques and for being deeply connected to the art world. A quick search revealed that Helena organized exhibitions of her collection and, coincidentally, was scheduling a new exhibition at her art gallery. I determined that this would be the door that would open my path. The vague intention of revisiting her began to manifest as a more solid plan. Who knows? Maybe she would be willing to open her collection and discuss the history of the dress. So, I prepared a presentation that linked the dress to its origins and its historical impact, something that would enchant her. I was skilled as an art conservator and knew Helena would be interested in the narrative behind the object. On the morning of the meeting, I dressed in a sober but elegant blouse, reflecting the strength and dignity my great-grandmother possessed. Upon arriving at the gallery, the space was filled with natural light, the white walls highlighting the artwork on display. The atmosphere was one of reverence and beauty, two qualities I was determined to embody. Helena greeted me warmly, and during our initial conversation, I shared my discoveries and the intimate connection I had with the dress. This isn't just an object, it carries the history of a generation, of women who faced and overcame challenges, I declared, trying to capture her interest and aiming to touch her artistic sensibilities. She was intrigued, her eyebrows raised in curiosity. "It's truly fascinating. Bring it along and I'd be delighted to examine it," she replied, and at that moment, I felt a wave of hope forming within me. I knew that from there, every step taken aimed not only to recover the dress, but to unite the past and the present. In the following weeks, I organized the logistics of taking the dress to Helena. With Peter by my side, we discussed the best ways to transport it. On the eve of the meeting, nervousness grew and transformed into excitement as I prepared for the dress's first live presentation. I wanted to do this in a way that reflected the respect my great-grandmother deserved. On the day of the exhibition, the dress was carefully packed in cotton cloth, wrapped in care and respect. Alongside Peter and a team of conservation professionals, we ensured every detail was perfect. When I finally entered the gallery with the dress in hand, the air was charged with anticipation. The respectful gazes of the visitors confirmed that I was bringing something truly special to this space. Helena watched the dress being unpacked with the same care and reverence that an artist has for their masterpieces. "Incredible," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion as she admired the details and textures of the piece. "This dress has a vibrant energy, carrying memories and stories." With this validation from someone so respected, my confidence soared. As we talked, I shared more about my great-grandmother, her struggles, and the meaning of the dress for our family. People around us began to approach, drawn in by the passionate conversation. The dress, a historical piece, had the ability to unite strangers through a shared belief in the strength of women. There was something special about this dress, almost palpable, a visitor murmured, and I smiled at her words. What was unfolding before me was beyond my expectations. The exhibition had transformed into a conversation about female empowerment and resilience. From there, we began discussing the possibility of Helena housing the dress in her gallery as part of an exhibition on the history of women through the years. This moment would be more than revenge against lords. It would be a tribute to what my great-grandmother represented and to the strength of all the women who came before her. Every time the dress was admired, it would tell a part of my story, and consequently, transform my family's narrative. In the following days, Helena and I stayed in touch, but my heart was focused on my original purpose. I didn't want this dress to become just another object on display. I wanted it to be a symbol of struggle and overcoming, and to represent what it meant to be close to the woman I dreamed of becoming. I had never felt such a strong purpose in my life. The dress remained an anchor, connecting me to my roots, and deep down, represented my personal growth. My love for Beatrice strengthened as I envisioned preparing something memorable for her. When our wedding day approached, it wouldn't just be vows. It would be the celebration of a broken story finally restored. So, as I planted my feet firmly on the ground of my family history, the certainty of what was to come began to occupy my thoughts. I would fight not only for the dress but for women's dignity, for the history that could not be erased, and for our ability to always rise again. With this, the exhibition Helena was preparing became a platform, an opportunity to give visibility to the women who shaped not only my character, but that of so many others with similar stories. Resistance manifested itself in each of my actions, and my determination grew with each passing day. After all, the fight for the dress had become a fight for identity, a battle for recognition and dignity. The story of women like my great-grandmother could echo through us. I was about to reclaim not only the dress, but also my place in the narrative. The voices of the women who came before me resonated louder with each step I took. And so, the journey of recovery was only just beginning. ready to transform each pain into strength, each hardship into memory. I knew that the day I would wear that dress would indeed be a glorious chapter in my history. As the day of the exhibition's opening approached, a mix of excitement and nervousness vibrated within me. The dress, now hanging in the gallery under soft lighting, had become more than a mere artifact. It was a symbol of struggle, resilience, and reclamation. Helena and I had worked tirelessly to create a narrative that not only highlighted the dress's beauty, but also celebrated the stories of the women who had worn it over the years. What began as a personal project had transformed into a platform for everyone to share their own stories of overcoming adversity. However, as the date drew nearer, some shadows also emerged. Lourdes didn't take long to find out about the exhibition. I could feel her critical and disapproving gaze even before she appeared. The way she used to belittle me still vibrated in my memories, a constant reminder of the resistance I was opposing. But now, instead of fearing her, I felt empowered. There was a new strength within me, the strength of the women in my lineage. On opening day, my mind was filled with insecurities and hopes. The gallery, with its white and vibrant walls, was filled with light, and the words I longed to share echoed in my mind. The connection I could make with other women who, like me, faced their battles, filled me with energy. When I arrived and saw the space, I noticed that several visitors had already arrived. The dress shimmered under the lights, and the meticulous placement we had done highlighted not only its beauty, but also the importance of its history. Moreover, women were gathered, sharing experiences, laughing and crying at the same time. It was an atmosphere charged with empowerment and emotional depth. Before the exhibition began, I prepared my speech. Today, we are not just here to admire a wedding dress. We are here to connect stories and celebrate the legacy of the women who came before us. As I reviewed the words I planned to say later, an elderly woman approached me. Her hands were wrinkled, but her eyes sparkled. "May I tell you about my grandmother?" she said. And we shared stories about the women in our lives, how legacy and struggles were inseparable parts of ourselves. The conversation flowed so naturally that before I knew it, the audience began to gather. Each shared story became a new thread in the tapestry of empowerment we were weaving. Their experiences intertwined with each other, forming an unbreakable network of strength and resilience. Meanwhile, I noticed that Lourdes had arrived, and her gaze was piercing. The weight of her expectations and tangible criticisms was almost deafening. She was there, and the urge to confront her grew, but the energy of the gallery anchored me in my determination. Rooted in the history that was finally being told, I wouldn't let her insecurities and disapprovals shake me. The exhibition began, and I was surrounded by people listening intently. I started speaking about the dress, emphasizing not only its physical characteristics, but also its depth. This dress belonged to my great-grandmother. It's not just a piece of fabric, but a testament to love, sacrifice, and resilience, I declared. My heart pounded, and the words flowed from me like water, inspired by the stories of so many women whose voices and struggles resonated within me. Today, as we celebrate this dress, we also celebrate all the women who came before us, our mothers, grandmothers, and all those who, often silently, fought their battles. I continued, scanning the faces in my audience, observing the emotional transformation taking place. I wasn't just speaking to them, I was speaking through them, to those who might never understand the untold stories. The intensity grew as more women began to speak up. A young artist shared her own journey, how her grandmother had defied oppression and tradition to become an artist. Another woman, elderly, spoke of how she'd never been allowed to wear a skirt or dress. The dress, now in the spotlight, became the center of a movement of remembrance and resistance. The room resounded with applause, and the energy was infectious. I wasn't just advocating for my legacy, but for all the women present. The dress had taken on a new meaning, and the exhibition had transformed into a path to recognize and value every story lost over the years. At the event's climax, Lourdes finally stood. Her discomfort was evident in her gaze, but something was different. Instead of the overwhelming passion of criticism, There was doubt in her expression. She tried to hide her insecurity, but she didn't have the power she previously held over me, and my words resonated with her. We're not here to compete, but to celebrate the diverse ways love and strength can manifest, I affirmed. For a brief, meaningful moment, our eyes met. It was as if the combination of our stories, past and present, were united in an ancient call to resistance. I understood in that instant that I wasn't just in a fight against lords, but fighting for all the voices that remained silent. The dress wouldn't just be an object. It would be a conduit for all the experiences we dared to share. As the event concluded, I felt immense relief seeing the dress become a positive and kind emblem. The gallery now vibrated with a collective spirit that encouraged everyone to share not only their struggles but also their triumphs. My eyes met Beatrice's, and the warmth of our love seemed to illuminate the room as I envisioned our future together. It wouldn't just be my legacy anymore. Her story would intertwine with mine, and together we would fight for all the women around us. The opening day hadn't just been a celebration of the past. It was an act of love for the present and a step toward the future. The dress, in all its splendor, had become a reminder that our stories are connected and that the battles we face, internal or external, shape and strengthen us. That night, as everyone dispersed, I took a moment alone before the dress, admiring every detail. It was more alive than ever, pulsating with the strength of so many women who dared to tell their stories. With the voices of all the women who came before me resonating in my chest, I knew the journey of reclamation was only just beginning. The story of the dress would be only the first chapter of a hopeful and determined narrative I was about to write throughout my life. It was the representation of all of us, women who would continue to move forward, breaking barriers and celebrating what it meant to be strong and indomitable. I was ready to rise, not just for myself, but for all those who look to us with hope and determination that our legacies will continue. The day of the wedding had finally arrived, and a mixture of happiness and anticipation filled my heart. The dress, which for so long represented not only my great-grandmother's strength, but the empowerment of all those who came before me, was now preparing to shine in a new light. This wasn't just a ceremony. It was a collective celebration of memories and stories of resistance, interwoven into a single fabric. The morning began with an electric energy pulsing in the air, and anxiety danced with joy in my chest. Looking in the mirror as I prepared, I could see not only myself, but the need to honor the legacy the dress carried. The room was adorned with flowers, delicate lights, and the laughter of friends and family, all present to witness this special moment. As the minutes unfolded, the feeling that we were about to change the narrative of our family solidified. The preparations unfolded, and I was grateful to have Beatrice by my side, a twinkle of love in her eyes. I remember looking at her face and seeing the support and determination reflected in her smile. "We're ready for this, Claire," she whispered at one point, and her voice seemed to vibrate with promising conviction. It was exactly what I needed to hear, a reinforcement of that sacred energy that united us on our journey. As we walked out for the ceremony, the dress was perfectly positioned, waiting to become part of this new narrative. I could feel the strength of the women who had worn this piece before me, as I slid my arms into its sleeves. It was as if every stitch was whispering tales of love, struggle, and hope, each fiber connecting me to them. The outdoor space was breathtaking. The sun illuminated the scene as if applauding our union. Looking out at the assembled crowd, brimming with love and anticipation, I thought of all the women who couldn't be there physically, but were, somehow, present in spirit. I imagined my great-grandmother smiling and supporting every step I took. And then, as I walked down the aisle beside Beatrice, the moment unfolded into a unique sense of certainty. I wasn't alone. We weren't just two people about to make promises. We were the sum of all the women who had faced adversity and found strength. The dress became an emblem, a centerpiece of something much larger. Reaching the altar, I saw Lourdes in the back, watching with an expression that oscillated between admiration and disbelief. It was as if this day was somehow reflecting her own internal battles, and although she had remained distant, something in her gaze was shifting. At the same time, she was there, witnessing the culmination of everything I had fought to achieve. The ceremony began, and the rabbi led the vows with a gentleness that filled the air with emotion. I had never felt so connected to Beatrice. When we joined hands and looked into each other's eyes, there was a rush of emotion between us. I promised to honor our female legacy, and above all to celebrate our futures together, I said, feeling the strength of the pain I had anticipated in my voice. Beatrice smiled, and, as in so many meetings before, our souls intertwined. "And I promise we will always defend our stories, our voices," she replied, the strength in her words echoing the memories of challenges overcome. But as the ceremony progressed, an inner voice began to unsettle me. It was the memory of Lourdes, the idea that her disapproval could still interfere with our happiness. As the moment unfolded, I realized I needed to confront her, right then and there, not as a battle or conflict, but as a love that could prevail. I wanted her to join us on this path of acceptance. At the end of the ceremony, before the kiss that would seal our union could happen, I looked directly at Lourdes. "This story is ours, as much as it is yours. We are equally our grandmothers and mothers, and as we look to the future, we need to support each other. The dress isn't a threat, it's a legacy to be celebrated." Lourdes seemed to freeze for a moment, her gaze fixed on my words. To my surprise, the gesture she made was so small, yet it meant so much. In a nearly hesitant movement, she nodded affirmatively, appreciating the strength of our words. The first step toward what could be a reconciliation was being taken. And so, when the kiss happened between Beatrice and me, a wave of new understanding flowed through the space. A new energy pulsed among everyone present. Efforts and hopes were intertwined in a narrative that finally united us. The dress was not just a garment, but a bridge between generations beginning to understand each other. The party was magnificent. Friends and family celebrated with joy and love, as I danced with Beatrice, basking in the promises and vows of love. The music was loud, and laughter echoed, everyone reiterating that this day was genuinely special. Lourdes, beside my mother, began to engage with the stories being told. She was participating. Our eyes met again, and the warmth in her intentions seemed to convey a signal that there was now space for me to not only speak for myself, but for the voices of my lineage to rise even further. The celebration continued, and as we savored the moments, the dress was revered, not as a relic on display, but as the beating heart of a collective story. Thus, the feeling that each of those present in that space was now intertwined encouraged us to believe. And so, as the party progressed, I looked to the future with renewed hope. Amidst laughter and dancing, I knew my struggle had not been in vain, and with that, I promised I would honor every story that this dress carried. It would again be a symbol of strength, but now full of love and vigor. It was a new path, with new possibilities, where I could finally rise, not just for myself, but for all the women who had risen over the years. As the lights began to dim and the night drew to a close, I felt grounded in a new understanding. The dress was more than just a legacy. It was an extension of our dreams and courage. These were our steps, and the journey was only beginning. It would be one of the most significant I could have. The morning after the wedding brought with it a profound revitalization. The dress was now imbued with new memories and hopes. Waking up next to Beatrice, I reflected on the power of this garment. More than a legacy, it was an emblem of achievement, strength, and newfound unity. A new tomorrow dawned, and the anticipation in my heart pulsed strongly, saying that the journey we had begun was only the tip of the iceberg. I decided it was vital to harness this energy and expand the message we had built around the dress's exhibition. "Let's invite more women to share their stories," I suggested to Beatrice over breakfast. As the exhibition had resonated so deeply with so many, it could be a way for us not only to tell our narratives, but also to allow other, still silenced voices to be heard. The desire to create a welcoming and safe space for women's stories became my focus in the days that followed. Together with Beatrice, we organized a new event at the gallery, an open space where we would invite women to gather and talk about their experiences, their struggles, and their triumphs, using the dress as a starting point. It was a vision that could transform any pain into power, and this idea ignited a strong resolve within me. As the event approached, I felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement. However, there was also a shadow looming over me, the possibility of Lords's resistance. I knew she wouldn't see this as a collective celebration, but as a challenge to the control she believed she had over our lives. This pressure created a fear that our achievement could be devalued. That morning of the event, the gallery was full, and women were starting to arrive. The space was vibrant, a perfect setting for the union of stories. The dress shimmered in the light, now more captivating than ever, promising to transform the event into a vibrant celebration. As the excitement grew, the echoes of voices mingled in smiles and enthusiastic conversations. Beatrice and I were there to welcome each guest, and gradually, the space filled with the energy of what we were about to build. As the microphone drew attention, I felt invigorated. We are here to celebrate our stories. The dress here is not just mine, it belongs to all of us, and that's why we're going to share it, I announced. The stories began to flow. An elderly woman spoke about her struggles in an oppressive marriage, while another shared her experiences dealing with unrealistic expectations about her professional life. Each account resonated, creating a vibrant tapestry of resilience, and as more women rose and told their truths, the collective strength grew, embracing each narrative. But amidst the warmth of the moment, what seemed like a night of victory was about to intensify. Suddenly, there was Lords, entering with an expression of disdain. I watched her presence stand out, and the tension in the room seemed to tighten. But there was no more room for insecurities in my heart. I had built a new reality. I took a deep breath and decided it was time to confront her. I walked towards her, each step grounding me more in the meaning of this new chapter. "Lords, you decided to come?" I asked, a little surprised, as she tried to maintain a neutral expression. "I couldn't ignore all this," she replied, the coldness in her voice contrasting with the warm energy that filled the gallery. "Do you really think this is what your great-grandmother would have wanted?" "Yes, I do. Why wouldn't I?" I said, as other eyes turned to us. "The dress needs to tell her story, just as it needs to tell mine and everyone else's here. We're here to connect, not to segregate." Her eyes flashed with a mixture of frustration and confusion. "But this isn't a spectacle, Claire. I'm worried you're losing yourself in this process," Lords warned. I saw that her challenge was becoming increasingly vulnerable. When we stop telling our stories, whether from the past or the present, we lose a part of ourselves. This isn't about competition or who controls more, but about embracing who we truly are. The room was attentive to our conversation, and a wave of understanding began to manifest as eyes turned to me. The dress, in all its splendor, became the beating heart of a new understanding. After a moment of hesitation, Lords's eyes softened. "Perhaps I've lost sight of that, but I can't accept that you ignore the tradition I established. And I'm not here to undo tradition, but to create it with you. The dress is a symbol of our shared stories," I affirmed, feeling the power in my words. After a long and meaningful silence, I could see her resistance breaking. The expressions on the audience's faces seemed to unite in a shared understanding. It was up to me to take the final step. "We're together, Lords, and I want you to join me in this. Together we can honor our history and shape new narratives." And so, with the tension dissipating, the energy of the gallery vibrated again. Suddenly, Lords made a gesture of rapprochement, and I saw in her eyes the intention to truly want to be a part of this. Let's find a way to honor this legacy. The event continued, the celebration intensified, and the women began to share their experiences again, now with Lord's presence. It was a moment of healing and transformation. The dress remained a symbol of all that the women represented, but now it was also a space of new possibilities. As the voices intertwined, I knew I had taken an important step towards the reunification of our history. What was unfolding in that space was more than just an event. It was a movement. a rebirth. I was surprised to realize how the struggle for power could become a collaboration. I left the gallery that night with a renewed sense of hope, surrounded by the voices of women who were willing to join the fight. The story, finally, was beginning to be told, and I was ready to walk alongside them, raising our voices united with love, strength, and the determination that our legacies would always be celebrated. I was, in fact, about to enter a new phase, where the fight for childhood and truth would continue to thrive.